Yo, 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 what up, man? Welcome back, man. It's your boy Ralph Sneaks coming to you with another episode, Damn You Too Sports Talk. I think it's episode 33, 32, 33. Um, Back with another one, man. Uh, Make sure y'all like, share, subscribe. If you ain't done it already, head over to YouTube. Um, Subscribe to the content. Make sure you hit the notification bell so you can get notified when new content releases. Um, you can follow me on the social media platforms. They're scrolling down at the bottom. On IG is damn_YouTube_sports talk. You can click the link in the bio and subscribe that way. Or if you want to head over and follow me on my personal page, is Ralph_Sneaks. Or on X, it's Damn You Too Sports Talk over there. Um, but yeah, man, another episode, another show. We're gonna get right to it, man. We had some college football shakeup yesterday. Um, we had some upsets, not a upset, but we had upsets. It's definitely gonna shake up the college football playoff bracket. Uh, Teams are not out. In my opinion, I don't think there's no way you can put teams like Bama and Ole Miss in there now. Um, there's just no way. Uh, Ole Miss, went down to Gainesville and lost to Florida. Bama went to Oklahoma and lost. Texas A&M went to Auburn and lost. Um, you had Indiana go to Ohio State and they lost. Um, you had Colorado got beat by Kansas. Notre Dame beat Army. Um, so you had some shakeups there. Um, you definitely it's definitely gonna shake some things up. Now that Georgia's in the SEC championship game, um, not sure who they're gonna play. I got to go back and look at it again. Not sure who they're gonna play, but I know Georgia is now in with Texas A&M losing to Auburn. That put Georgia in the SEC championship game. I'm not sure who they're gonna play. My guess it probably will be the winner of the Texas and Texas A&M game uh, this coming weekend. So the winner of that game will play Georgia in Atlanta in the SEC championship game. Um, Now, if Texas A&M had a beat Auburn last night, and I think that game went to like 4 overtimes. If Texas A&M had a beat Auburn last night, that would have been a possibility where it could be setting up back-to-back weeks of, or possibly could have been back-to-back weeks of Texas and Texas A&M playing each other. They already gonna play each other in the season finale, and it could have been a possibility where they play again the following week in the SEC championship game in Atlanta. But obviously that's not going to be the case because Georgia's there. So the winner of that game rather will play Georgia in the SEC championship game. So here's the thing, here's my thing. How far will Indiana fall back because Indiana was 5, and they lost at Ohio State. Uh, I think the real rankings, the ones that they officially go by, I think they come out Tuesday. It's either tomorrow or Tuesday. I think it's Tuesday. Um, so how far will Indiana fall? I think Ole Miss is out. You lost at Florida. You lost earlier to Kentucky, and you lost earlier to LSU. So that's 3 conference losses. I think they're done. Um, and you're looking at a situation with Ole Miss, and you kind of scratching your head because Ole Miss was one of those teams that went and got a lot of talent out the portal. They brought a lot of talent down to Oxford. You know what I'm saying? Um, and Lane Kiffin is not going to be in the college football playoffs. And that's with them expanding from 4 teams to 12 teams. So you got a situation now where you might be looking at how much more longer can you roll with Lane Kiffin if you Ole Miss? Because you went and got the talent. You went and had the one big signature win uh, versus Georgia. You beat Georgia. I mean, you look damn good doing it against a premier team. And then you come back and look half-assed against Florida. You looked half-assed against Kentucky. You looked half-assed against LSU. And The wheels are falling off of LSU. I don't think Brian Kelly is the guy for LSU. That's just my opinion. I don't think Brian Kelly is the SEC type of coach. He just don't have that SEC type pedigree, and you can see it by how LSU played. You look at LSU, the defense ain't there like it normally is. He can't get control of his players. You just got people down there doing whatever they want to do. Teams don't even fear going to Death Valley no more. Teams used to fear going to Death Valley, especially at night. But now you got teams coming in there doing what they want to do. Players not responding to Brian Kelly like they should as the coach. You're getting beat. Your defense is half-assed, and you're too inconsistent. So, in my opinion, Brian Kelly ain't really a SEC caliber coach, especially for LSU. You know, um, but back to Lane Kiffin, I don't know how much more longer they gonna roll with Lane Kiffin, uh, because there was absolutely no reason for you to lose that game in Gainesville yesterday. When you had opportunities to tie the game up and put the pressure back on Florida and force them to make a mistake so you can get back into the flow and being comfortable within that game, you not only lead points on the field, but you don't even convert on the fourth down. There was a couple chances. I think it was like 2 or 3 chances where they had 4th and 1 and they didn't get it when they were in field goal range. They left the points on the field, didn't tie the game up by kicking a field goal. And I'm not saying that the field goal was going to be automatically made because we don't know anything could have happened. It could have been a bad snap. It could have been a block. Or he could have just missed the field goal altogether. But he 4th and 1, you in field goal range. You got a chance to tie the game up. The momentum is clearly on the side of Florida. The crowd is into the game. You take the 3 points, tie the game up, and you put the pressure back on Florida. And you force Florida to make the mistake. And then you can get back to playing your brand of ball. But when you don't make it, when you go for it on 4th down and you don't get it, and then you don't move the ball like you should, like Ole Miss is normally doing, uh, and your defense can't stop Florida. I mean, that's an issue. You clearly don't look the same down in Gainesville as you looked at home against Georgia. And I get it, you was on the road down in Florida and you played Georgia at home, but still, you gave that to me. Oh, to me right now, that game that they beat Georgia, it almost felt like they remembered when they went down to Athens last year and got all kinds of hell beat out of them. I think the score was 52-17, something like that. They got all kinds of hell beat out of them last year by Kirby and the crew down in Athens. It's almost like they had that game circled on the calendar and said, this is the game that we going to come out and play our best because remember how y'all did us last year. Y'all beat the hell out of us, like 52-17, something like that. And we got this game circled at home against that same Georgia team that whooped our ass last year on the road. So we going to come out and give everything we got to make sure we beat this Georgia team this time around. And then after that, it's like Ole Miss didn't look the same. They went down to Florida, and now Florida has beat 2 back-to-back solid. They beat LSU last week, and then they come back and beat Ole Miss this week. So, it's just like a big. I don't know, man. It's just like a big scramble board right now in the SEC. But I'm not sure how long Ole Miss is gonna ride with Lane Kiffin. I'm not sure what his contract is. I got to go and look into it, but I'm not sure right now what his contract is, how many years, and how much money he got left remaining on that. But you look at the situation with the portal, and that's what I said earlier. And I don't think I made a video about it, but I was telling somebody else earlier that that's the thing with this portal and this NIL. These coaches have got their leash cut shorter. You don't have a 3-year window or 3-year pass no more to get the old guys out and get your recruiting class and get your guys in, your quarterback, get your system in place. You don't have time for that no more. Because the portal and the NIL and all that stuff, it done speeded all that up. The way these guys can transfer in now, the way these guys are getting paid to move from here to there to get guys to come where they need to come, the way they can throw this money at these guys, the way these guys can jump in this portal and move the way they need to move to get where they need to go or want to go or whatever, that sped up the winning. You can't sit here and tell me with the way the portal is now and the way this NIL money is now that you can give a coach 3 to 4 years to get his guys in. No, you can get your guys in the following year and get them on the field the following year. You know, matter of fact, depending on when you get hired, you can get your guys in there that same year. You know, because I know they got an open and close window for when the portal is open and when it closed, and then when it reopen and when it closed again. I'm not sure about the dates, but depending on when you get hired, you can get your guys in there that same season you get hired. Now it's damn near impossible to go from, you know, a 500 team to being a national championship contender in the course of 1 year. You know, because I mean, I'm not saying that it can't happen, but it rarely ever has. It's damn near impossible. The last one I can think of off the top of my head was when Cam went to Auburn. In the course of one season, I don't remember what Auburn was that year prior to Cam coming there, but when Cam got there, they went undefeated, the national championship and a Heisman Trophy. So it can happen, but it rarely happens. And that was way back when the portal, when the NIL wasn't even, that wasn't it. You know what I'm saying? So you're looking at a situation where Ole Miss did a lot in the portal. They brought a lot of guys in. And the way that they went out this season with Lane Kiffin, I'm not sure how long I haven't heard of them planning on doing nothing with Lane Kiffin, but I'm not sure how long, you know, they're going to stick with Lane Kiffin. Like I said, especially with the playoffs expanding from 14 to 12 teams. And the way you lose those 3 conference games, you pretty much out. You out of it. I don't see a scenario in which Ole Miss stays in that top 12. I don't see a scenario in which Alabama stays in that top 12. Because if you look at, because Ole Miss is just like Bama. 2 of their 3 losses was against unranked teams. I think when they lost to Kentucky, Kentucky wasn't ranked. I don't think they was. I'm pretty sure Kentucky wasn't ranked when they lost to Kentucky. And Florida wasn't ranked when they lost yesterday to Florida. So just like Bama, 2 of their 3 losses against unranked teams. Bama lost, you know, 3, and 2 of them unranked, Vanderbilt and yesterday at Oklahoma. So there's not a scenario in which Bama gets in. Now, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. DeBoer, the head coach. Now, if it's a situation where next week he loses the Iron Bowl to Auburn, they might be talking about getting rid of him after his first year. You can't come into Bama with the way, and I keep stressing this, the way this portal and this NIL is set up, you could get players in immediately. You don't have to wait 2 to 3 years to get your guys in and get the old coaches' guys off the field and get your guys in for you to start turning things around and get your system in play. This Alabama. The transfer portal is open. The NIL is available. You can get your guys in immediately. Now, it could be a situation, I'm not saying it is, but it could be a situation where if this guy loses the Iron Bowl, that'll be the 4th loss for Bama this year, and you lost to an in-state rival. That's one thing they don't want in Bama. They don't want you losing to Auburn. Not only you losing to Auburn, but you got 3 other losses on top of that. You lost at Vanderbilt out of all teams. And I understand Vanderbilt is better this year than they were in a while. But you lost to Bama unranked. You lost to Oklahoma unranked. Now I'm going to give Oklahoma a lot of credit because they played damn good last night. They held Bama to just 3 points. I can't remember the last time Bama ended the game with only 3 points. They played good defense against Jalen Milroe. It was senior night. They picked them off, I think, 3 times? One of them was a pick 6, and another one was damn near pick 6. And I've been saying that's what you got to do with Jalen Milroe. You got to take away his legs and make him be a pure passing quarterback. You gotta do that for 4 quarters. And that's what Oklahoma did. They played good defense. They took away his running lanes. They sealed them edges, and they applied pressure. Now I don't know why in the hell Bama couldn't get nothing going. There was a couple questionable calls toward in the fourth quarter. When Bama was trying to make a run to get back in this thing, but um, that's still no. It shouldn't even came down to that. I mean, they just could not do nothing last night against Oklahoma. And Oklahoma at times this season has looked awful. Oklahoma at times this season don't even look like a team that belong in the SEC. But last night they did, holding Bama to just 3 points, handing them the third loss, and basically putting them out of the college football playoffs. And like I said, this coach here, if he loses next week in the Iron Bowl to Auburn, that might be it. That might be a wrap for him in his first year. The only way it ain't a wrap for him if he loses to Auburn is if it's got to be a real close loss. And they at home too. I think they in Tuscaloosa. So you can't lose to Auburn at home. I don't give a damn how close of a loss it is. It could be a 1-point loss. They don't want that, especially not at home. So if this dude go out there next week at home and lose Iron Bowl to Auburn, we might start hearing stuff about this dude maybe on his way out. And the only reason he may not be on his way out is if they don't already have somebody else lined up ready to go. Now I get it. It's tough to come behind a guy like Nick Saban and duplicate what he did. But I keep telling you this, that NIL and that portal has taken away, has shortened their leash on these coaches and has taken away for them to say, well, I need to get my guys in and get these guys out. I got to get my staff. I got to get my system in play, this, and third. That the portal and the NIL took all that off. You can get your guys in the same year you get there. So, Bama, done. Ole Miss, done. Not sure how far Indiana's gonna fall after they lost at Oklahoma. You had Notre Dame take care of Army. Penn State barely hung on and won and beat Minnesota. Miami, they took care of Wake Forest. Georgia, they played UMass, so they'll bump up in the rankings. Especially with Bama losing, Indiana losing, Boise State. I think Boise State is right there at 12. Tennessee 11. So they won. Colorado lost to Kansas. So I'm not sure how much of. Now there could have been a possibility where Colorado got in. They win. They go to the conference game and win it, and it's a possibility they could get in, especially how everything played out yesterday with Bama losing, with Ole Miss losing. There probably would have been a situation where Colorado could have gotten into, or probably would have gotten into that top 12 had they beat Kansas yesterday. They would have slid up. Went to the conference game and won. That definitely would have probably put them in. Like I said, especially with Ole Miss and Bama losing yesterday. So there's definitely some shakeup in this college football playoff. I'm just curious to see what the rank is going to be when they come out. But I definitely know there's definitely not a situation in my mind, in my opinion, where Ole Miss gets in and Bama. Both of those teams have 3 conference losses. 2 of those 3 conference losses came against unranked teams. And you're looking at it where, and I don't think Bama was a solid team this season anyway. There were a couple games they lost. I mean, a couple games that they won that they should have lost. Now I understand we can't go by shoulda, woulda, coulda, but you're looking at a team like South Carolina who should have won that game. You're looking at that Georgia-Bama game in which Georgia came all the way back and took a lead late. Um, and then Bama had to pull out a nail bite at the end to win the game. Because Georgia did have the momentum in the second half, and they came all the way back and took a lead in that game. Um, so it just it's just not a it's just not a good season, for Bama football. Nick Saban retiring. That's those are some big shoes to fill for anybody to come be the head coach of Alabama football after Nick Saban's retirement. So that's one. Then, like I said, you're looking at the situation down at Ole Miss, what they gonna do with Lane Kiffin. You're looking at how far Indiana gonna fall, because those two, in my opinion, are out. Ole Miss and Bama, they out. Curious to see what two teams slightly on the outside could now get in, because I thought it was a chance that if Colorado took care of Kansas yesterday, which they didn't, and they go and win their conference, that was a team that was going to be that could get in. Like I said, especially looking at what happened yesterday in college football. Texas A&M lost, Ole Miss lost, Bama lost. So with them having, if they had to beat Kansas, like I said, which they didn't, if they had to beat Kansas, then go on, and take care of business and then get to the conference championship game, that they would have been, in my opinion, in. But they didn't take care of Kansas, so that pretty much eliminates them as well. Uh, Boise State is still, hanging around. Tennessee still there. Georgia obviously there. They're gonna be in the SEC championship game. Now, what I want to know is how much weight is the loser of the SEC champ? How much is that gonna matter? You know, because you look at last year, Georgia was undefeated going into the SEC championship game against Bama. They lost. That was their first and only loss of the season, and they got bumped out of the top four. And that was their only loss at the SEC championship game. Um, So obviously that win was big enough to get Bama in, although Bama had, uh, although Bama had already lost. Um, they lost to Texas. Um, I think Bama had two losses last year, if I'm remembering right. It's early in the morning, and my mind kind of. But I know they lost that game at Texas. Um, but anyway, that win in the SEC championship game was a big enough win to get them in over Georgia or one loss Georgia team. And that one loss that Georgia had came in the SEC championship game against Bama. So I'm curious to know how much weight is the SEC championship game going to carry? Because I'm sitting here like, if I'm Georgia or any other SEC team, in which I understand two teams got to get to the SEC championship game, but if I'm those SEC teams and I'm in the college football playoffs right now, I'm looking at a situation where, like, I got two losses. I don't want to be in the SEC championship game. I want somebody else to go to the SEC championship game and let the loser of that game, let me see how far they fall out, because Georgia got to be sitting there shaking their head like, we was in the SEC championship game last year, and our first and only loss of the season came in the SEC championship game last year, and that wasn't enough to keep us in. It booted us out. Now Georgia's going into the SEC championship game this year with two losses. So if they lose in the SEC championship game, that'll be the third loss. So if you didn't get in, and I get it, it was only 4 teams last year compared to the 12 they expanded to this year. But if you didn't get in with one loss last year, what makes you think they're going to put you in with 3 losses? So if I'm an SEC team, I'm sitting there like, damn, I really don't want to be in the SEC championship game, because you're going to get penalized for losing that game despite being in that game. Now I'm pretty sure they're going to factor in how bad you lost if you lose. Now if you lost by a touchdown, if it's like a 30-20 game or something like that, or 31-27, some game like that, that's not, I don't think that's gonna be as bad as a 35-13 or 38-14 type game. You know what I mean? They're probably gonna factor in how you lose the game, but still at the end of the day, I wouldn't want to risk it. If I'm an SEC team, I wouldn't want to be if I'm an SEC college football playoff team, I wouldn't want to be nowhere near that SEC championship game because you lose that game and that's your third loss. You could be out of there, and another team on the edge could get bumped in when you get bumped out. Now, if you go to that SEC championship game and you win it, you set. You set if you win that game. But if you don't win that game and you sitting in that game with two losses, and that loss makes it the third loss, then you don't want to leave nothing in the committee's hands with that many, with that many variables in play. You did get to the SEC championship game, because this is the year where the SEC don't have the East and West. There's no East, there's no West. So if you were able to get to the SEC championship game with the gauntlet of the schedule that they gave you this year without having the East-West divisions, then that says a lot for you to even make it to the SEC championship game with them doing away with the East-West and mixing up the schedules they did and making the gauntlet. You know, because if you look at Georgia, they played at Bama, they played at Ole Miss, they played at Texas. You know, and two of those three games they lost, which was Ole Miss and Bama, but they went on the road and beat Texas. So that's a gauntlet of a schedule, compared to what the schedules were when it was the East-West division. And they always have a few little gimme cupcake games in there, which all schedules do. Like the UMass was a cupcake game, and they had a couple at the beginning of the season. But that's just to show you how balanced college football is now. Because even though Georgia beat Kentucky, I think they only beat them by a point. It was like 13-12. And then you get a Kentucky team that go on the road and beat Ole Miss, and an Ole Miss team that beat Georgia, and Georgia barely beat a Kentucky team in Lexington. So that just shows you how balanced the college football has become, especially in a conference like the SEC. So now if you're the committee, you got to weigh all that in. You got to take all that into consideration and consider all that now. The SEC is just beating up on each other. I don't think the SEC has gotten weaker because it's not as many SEC teams at the top. Because you're looking at Oregon 1, Ohio State 2, who was 3? Texas 3, Penn State 4, Ohio, Indiana was 5. They're gonna bump back, down. They're gonna drop down because they lost to Ohio State. Then you're looking at Notre Dame 6, Bama was 7. They're gonna bounce. Then you had Miami 8. Ole Miss was 9, and obviously they lost to Florida. They're gonna bounce out. Georgia 10, Tennessee 11, Boise State 12. You know what I mean? That people were saying that the conference is gotten weaker since the portal was. It's not necessarily that. I think just when they did it, that had something to do with it. But when they went away from the East West and the SEC, the schedule, the gauntlet, the schedules got more tougher. And you just got a lot of SEC teams beating up on each other. Like I just said, Georgia loses to Bama. Bama loses to Tennessee, but Georgia beats Tennessee. You know what I'm saying? So then you have South Carolina loses to LSU, but then South Carolina turns around and beats they beat Texas A&M, and Texas A&M loses to Auburn. It's tough, it's just a tough. It's tough. Georgia beat Florida. Florida beat Ole Miss, but Georgia loses to Ole Miss. I mean, it's tough. They beating up on each other. Now, I will go on record and say this: if there was any 3-win team that I would be scared of, if they get in, which I don't think they will, but if they did somehow, some way, you're gonna look at a team like South Carolina. That's a scary team right now. Defensively, the way they play, compared, in addition to the mobility of the quarterback that they have, you know what I'm saying? So that's a dangerous team. That's what I'm saying. The SEC is not washed like people think, because a lot of those teams are not up there in the top 6, top 7, or whatever. The SEC is just beating up on each other. You know, I don't think a team like, well, BYU, they done lost 2 straight. I think they lost last week at Kansas or K-State. One of them teams beat them, and then they lost again yesterday. So, but at one point, they were riding pretty high. But I don't think a team like BYU is going to come in there and beat a SEC team. You know, I'm just throwing that out there. You know what I mean? That's not saying the SEC is watered down. It's just the fact that the SEC is beating up on each other more now. The schedules have gotten tougher for teams. You know, Florida had a hell of a schedule. You know, you look at Georgia had a tough schedule. At Bama, at Ole Miss, at Texas. That's tough. In addition to Tennessee, which you got them at home. And now you're looking at Georgia Tech next week. That ain't no gimme game because Georgia Tech has gotten better, even though they're in a different ACC conference, but they've gotten better. They knocked off Miami a couple weeks ago. You know, might have been last week or week before, but they beat Miami. And it's not saying much, but they opened the season with a signature win over in Ireland against Florida State. And that ain't saying much because we know Florida State ain't did shit this year. So, but at the time when they beat Florida State, we thought Florida State was going to be a solid team this year. Nobody knew week 1 going over into Ireland that Georgia Tech would beat Florida State, you know, but they went over there and won. And now you can't really say that's a signature win because of how Florida State looked after that, because Florida State didn't look like shit after that, you know. But the point I'm making is the Georgia Tech game next week for Georgia ain't no gimme. You know, Georgia Tech has improved. You know, Georgia Tech, I was at the game last year in Atlanta, but Georgia Tech played Georgia tough last year in Atlanta. And obviously this year is going to be at Georgia's going to get them at home in Athens. But Georgia Tech this year has improved and gotten better than they were last year. Um, Matter of fact, that's 2 years in a row they didn't beat Miami. They beat Miami last year on some bonehead stuff with Miami had going on with the fumble. And then Georgia Tech went down the field and scored a game-winning touchdown. And then they beat them in Atlanta this year. So Georgia Tech is improved. That's not a gimme game for Georgia. So Georgia Tech not a gimme game this coming week for Georgia. Then, like I said, they went on the road to Ole Miss. They went on the road to Bama. They went on the road to Texas. And they lost 2 of those 3 road games. And they still had on their schedule Tennessee, you know, and I'm not even counting Mississippi State and Auburn, but Auburn just had a good signature win against Texas A&M. And then they went to Lexington, Kentucky, and barely squeezed and barely won it. You know, but then you get Kentucky to go on the road down to Oxford and beat Ole Miss. But Georgia went to Oxford and lost to Ole Miss. So it's just the SEC beating up on each other a lot. You know, man, it's not no fall off. You know, you can see the talent is being spread out throughout the conference. And the scheduling has gotten tougher, and they've done away with the East-West division. But I'm just curious to know how they're gonna shake this thing up. But those 2 teams are definitely out, in my opinion. Ole Miss and Bama, that is. 3 losses in the conference, 2 of those 3 being against unranked teams. You know, so you know, Boise still in, Tennessee still in. You know, Georgia obviously is still in it, going to Atlanta to the SEC championship game. But I'm real curious to see how this thing play out for Georgia, who they play in the SEC championship game, and how much this loss will count against whoever loses the SEC championship game. And how, because it's really you really don't want to be in the SEC championship game. You rather somebody else I understand 2 teams got to go, but you don't want to be one of those 2 teams. You want one of those 2 teams to go. You want 2 teams to go, and the loser, you just want the committed to do whatever they're going to do with them, and you not have to worry about that extra loss, you know, that extra game played. And I always thought that about the SEC championship game when it came to the playoffs, since the playoffs been in, because that was a weird, and I didn't agree with Georgia being left out of the college football playoffs last year because they went undefeated, you know, and I didn't agree with Florida State being left out. I think if you win the games you're supposed to win, despite the players you win with, if you win, a win is a win. You go to the game and play the game to win, and if you win, despite the players that you won with, you won. Because that was the whole argument last year with Florida State. Nobody wanted to see Florida State in there because of the quarterback situation, but they won. You know, um, that you shouldn't go to you shouldn't be going to the college football playoffs based off of who on your team. You should be going based off your record in the games you won to get you there to qualify you to get there. So Georgia getting to the SEC championship game and losing it, and that was the only loss they had last season. Got them bumped out, and it put Bama in. So Georgia, you lose, this will be your third loss. Obviously it's going to be a SEC team you lose to because you're in the SEC championship game. But how far you fall if you fall out, that'll be, it's a lot going into this right now. You know what I mean? I haven't looked at the updated brackets of what it's going to be. Obviously all that stuff come out in the coming days, but when it do, man, I'm just curious to see how far these teams fall back, especially Indiana. You're looking at a situation where Indiana hasn't really played anybody this season so far until they went to the horseshoe yesterday at Ohio State um, and got beat. So are they going to factor that into the equation as well? Is the strength of schedule for Indiana? Because Indiana ain't really played nobody. I mean, you know, um, until yesterday, and you see what happened. You know, Army didn't really play nobody, but in they go to Notre Dame and get the hell beat out of them. Same thing with Indiana. They go to the horseshoe up at Ohio State and get the hell beat out of them. So, like I said, those teams, how much could they really hang with Georgia? You know what I mean? How much can they really hang with a Texas, a SEC team? And that's what I'm saying. It's not that the SEC fell off. It's just the schedules got tougher and everybody beating up on everybody to make it seem like that. But it's definitely not a fall off. You know what I mean? I wouldn't go. It's definitely not a fall off. So even looking at Miami, you know, how far is Miami gonna bump up? They had that loss against like I said, Georgia Tech. And then they bounced back and beat Wake Forest. Wake Forest is not really a threat, but so you know, we'll see. We'll see. I'm just waiting on these rankings to come out to see who dropped where. But I'm definitely not expecting Ole Miss and Bama. I think they're done. They're done. You know, and it could get worse for Bama if they lose this Iron Bowl this coming weekend in Auburn at home. You know what I mean? Things could really get serious down there in Tuscaloosa. They're gonna be calling for some heads down there. That's one thing I know they don't want. They don't want to lose to Auburn, especially at home. And they already have 3 losses that's going to keep them out of the college football playoffs, and that's not Bama-like because the college football expanded the playoffs from 4 to 12. You would think that Bama would be in those 12 teams. You expecting Bama to be in the 4, so you definitely expecting them to be in the 12. And they won't be. They was already shaky. With 2 losses and now you get a third against an unranked team. That's your second. You losing. That's your second loss to an unranked team. Well, 3 overall, but 2 on the unranked team. Um, they're going to be calling for some heads down there in Tuscaloosa if you come out there and um, you don't beat Auburn. And even last year you barely beat Auburn in Auburn. It came down to what, a 4th and 20 something or 4th and 30 or whatever. And Jalen Milroe scrambling around all day long in the pocket, and he finally found a guy in the end zone, and that was the game-winning touchdown that sent sent Alabama to the SEC championship game against Georgia, and then it was just that saved their season. You know what I mean? So they barely won last year, and that was with Saban still coaching. They barely won at Auburn. So, and then you got Auburn coming off a huge win versus Texas A&M. It was a 4 overtime game that they won against Texas A&M. So they're going to be riding a little momentum in the Tuscaloosa. And you got Bama coming off a terrible game out in Oklahoma last night. So coming back home off a terrible loss against an unranked team, and then you got Auburn, who's unranked, coming to your house off a big upset win against a Texas A&M team. You know, the momentum, and they're gonna be riding high. Auburn is, I'm talking. They're gonna be riding high when they come into Tuscaloosa. And you got Bama, who played one of the worst games, only scoring 3 points. Didn't pretty much do a damn thing last night against Oklahoma. Gonna be coming back off a tough loss against an unranked team. So that's gonna be a to see how Bama responds under this guy because obviously Saban is not there uh, to galvanize these guys and get them back refocused. So let's see how they respond off a horrible play and loss last night in Oklahoma, coming back to play an in-state rival at home, in which that in-state rival is coming off a big win, a big upset win at home. So just anxious and curious to see how that play off. The same thing with Georgia and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, like I stated before, is much improved this year than they were last year. And it's also an in-state rival. So, Georgia Tech could be coming to Athens looking to put a dent and still put a dent in Georgia's season and hand them a third loss. It won't be a conference loss, but it'll be a third loss. And so we just gonna see how this thing shake up, man. I'm anxious to see. Um, and I'll be back with new content after that releases to give you my thoughts and predictions on what I think is gonna happen. But like I said, man, with now is gonna be the time where you can really tell, um, who can weather the storm. Because like I said, the portal and his NIL money, and we just seen what's his name, Bryce Underwood. We just seen him flip. He just took the $10.5 million offer from Michigan. He flipped his commitment from LSU to Michigan. So that's a big loss for Brian Kelly and LSU down there in Baton Rouge. So you know what I mean? It's changing. You know what I mean? So we really gonna be able to see who can weather the storm with the movement of these players from the NIL money to the portal. It's getting tough. So now is gonna be the time you can really tell which coach can weather the storm, which coach can bounce back from losing a key player, which coach can kind of, get through the adversity of all this movement, these players doing, jumping in the portal, moving from here to there, getting the money going here to there, whatever. So now you can really tell which coach is which, because you're not able to stack up 5-star players 2 and 3 deep at each position no more. These players is on the move. They get in the portal and they getting the hell on. They taking the money and they leaving and they going and they doing what they got to do. Now I do think they need to put some rules and stipulations on this thing, so you can better control it. I'm not saying don't pay the players. The players deserve to get paid because college football has been making tons and tons and tons of money off these kids for years, and they haven't been able to get nothing in return. So I'm not mad that these guys is getting money. But what I am saying is you're going to have to put some rules and stipulations on this thing because it's only going to get out of hand. We just seen, like I said, Bryce Underwood take, they offered 10.5. I heard it was up to 12 million at one point, but yeah, I think he flipped his commitment from LSU to Michigan. Now that flip wouldn't have happened, in my opinion, without that 10.5. Without them 10 M's, without that wouldn't have happened. So I think there need to be some rules and stipulations on it. Don't take the money away. Let them get the money, but put rules and stipulations on it. For example, I'm not saying this need to be it, but for example, if you take an NIL money over a certain amount, you have to commit to that school. You can't jump in the portal. You got to do at least, let's just say you got to do at least 2 years there. Just something like that. Or if you jump in the portal, you can't play the first 2 games. You jump in the portal for a second time, you can't play 3 games or something like that'll you ain't just jumping in the portal every year. And if you do, you're not playing the first 2 games or the first 3 games. That's going to be your penalty for jumping in the portal. Now there would be exceptions, like if your coach get fired that you came there to play with, he end up getting fired or leaving, that would give you an exception to jump in the portal without being penalized. Or if something happened at the school and you have to jump in the portal and leave, that those are things that are beyond your control. You know what I'm saying? So you shouldn't be penalized for that. But just to be jumping in the portal, moving here to there, just to be going because you can't have your way and play, then okay, yeah, you jump in the portal, but you sitting out the first 2 games. And then if you jump in the portal again, wherever you go, you sitting out the first 3 because that's your second time in the portal. It just need to be some little stipulations on stuff like that, so it won't be so much movement. You know what I mean? Players can get the bag, but it also won't be so much movement, and it'll kind of better control things and have it a little bit more organized, a little bit more structured. Because the way it's going right now, they just throwing money out there, and these players is moving, doing what they want to do. You know what I mean? So, I think that's what the situation need to be. But yeah, man, I'm just anxious and curious to see what these numbers is gonna look like as far as these rankings when they come out, because we had some upsets happen. It shook up the college football playoff picture. Um, some disappointing teams this year, and there's gonna be some surprise teams this year. So just curious to see what it is, and when this information dropped, then I'll be back with another video. But until then, man, y'all be safe. Um, Make sure y'all follow me on the links and stuff that's scrolling down the bottom of the screen. If you want to follow me on IG, the sports page is damn_you2_sports talk. Click the link in the bio and you can subscribe to the YouTube page that way. Once you do that, make sure you click that notification bell so you can get notified when new content releases. Follow me on X, it's Damn You Too Sports Talk, or you can follow me personally on IG, Ralph_Sneaks. Until the next one, man, y'all be safe.